Are you ready for some football? Well, I think I know the answer to that question, but that's now a question that can be asked with excitement because football is here. Football is no longer really on the horizon, as football is now here, and Pittsburgh Steelers football is now here, as the Pittsburgh Steelers are prepared to kick off the 2020 season, something that maybe we didn't think was actually going to happen, but they are ready to kick off the 2020 regular season on Monday night. So not over the weekend, on Monday night football, prime time against the New York Football Giants. So two historic franchises colliding, not in the same division, not in the same conference, no familiarity there, but Steelers, Giants, Monday Night Football, and football season is now finally here. And I'm your host, Mike Asti, and this is, again, something that maybe we thought wouldn't happen, although the way the NFL continued to power through, if any league was going to do this, it was going to be the National Football League, and here we are. They are going to kick off the 2020 season. Virus be damned. I'm your host, Mike Asti, again, and this is the 2020 Steelers preview show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and, of course, SteelersNow.com. So what I'm going to do here, and I'm doing this live, if we get chatters, I'll talk to you. If not, I'll go through the schedule, kind of pick apart each game and give my pick in terms of the Steelers' record and where they're going to fall in their division and the landscape of the league. Been talking throughout the weeks, throughout the months about different news and notes, about different moves of the offseason, and Cam Hayward now locking up for several years, Ben's comeback season, and you can watch his videos to really tell that story. The pressure that's been on Juju Smith-Schuster, the pressure that's on James Conner this year, the new additions of Chase Claypool from the draft, Eric Ebron, who, again, many are very high on in the offseason, maybe going to be the best offseason move. We'll see. That might be a little foreshadowing to my takes there. But now it is time to really lay it on the line. So let at old takes exposed, strike me down if I'm wrong. But as I've said, and this is no secret, this is a Steelers season with a lot more expectations than even the last couple. And yes, they had expectations of making the playoffs. They did not. These are disappointing seasons for the Steelers. But once Ben went down, reasonable folk could say, okay, this is not going to be a championship season. Ben is now back. He's nervous, but he's back. He's healthy. He's throwing well. There are more weapons there. You have a veteran who you figure is going to take a little bit more care of the football and at the very least be more dynamic leading this offense. That all could help. The defense is a year older, but a year better, a year more mature. Multiple players are Defensive Player of the Year candidates on this Steelers defense. And many of these players are going to be there the entire season rather than trading for Minka a few games in, Ben going down, the whole quarterback carousel with Duck and Mason Rudolph. More continuity, you would assume, coming into the season, despite doing it in the midst of a global pandemic. All of that points to maybe some more optimism around the Pittsburgh Steelers. But kicking things off here, Steelers will start off the season against the New York Football Giants, Monday Night Football. And that's a game the Steelers should win. And I'm going to say the Steelers are going to win. That's a Giant team that's had people predict them all over the scope in terms of what they're going to do this year. And this is another season of Daniel Jones. It's another year of Saquon Barkley, who's still the focal point of that offense. Shepard and company also there as receivers with Daniel Jones. The defense suspect, though. This is a Giants team that's been losing for now a couple years. They're fully now moving on from Eli Manning with him gone this entire season, retiring. And that's another player from Ben's draft class that is gone. Well, Ben's looking for a comeback season, and he is back. But the important part of this is this Giants team hasn't been good. They haven't improved, really. They're going to have another season of Daniel Jones, and he did better than expected. I know actually a couple years ago, 2009 NFL draft show, we were doing it on location. We didn't have to do it here in home studios like this past year because that was pre-pandemic mode. And we laughed, and we kind of have a little segment there that we couldn't believe the Giants drafting Daniel Jones, trading up to draft Daniel Jones. It ended up being a laugh fest. But really, he ended up being the one to laugh last at us because he played well better than expectations. He does give you that Eli Manning vibe again, but he even took care of the football a little bit better than Eli has been doing throughout his career. And maybe gives you some confidence that he can be the guy for the next era of Giant football, but still feels like a little bit early to be saying that's going to be anything special for the Giants this year. Not only that, but the Steelers team has tons more talent than the Giants. And the Steelers have disappointed the last couple of years for sure. But they have more talent than New York. They have a better defense than New York, and that's going to be the key here. The Steelers' defense with TJ Watt, with Bud Dupree, with that entire secondary that's healthier, that is still a recluse, Minkah Fitzpatrick, of course. They may try to take him out of the game, okay, but he's that Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu spark plug. He's going to find the ball somewhere. He's going to be all over that field. They're working this entire offseason to make sure he's not taken out of games, even if maybe he can't win as many individual accolades, but still that front of the Steelers, the linebackers, they're going to be swarming Daniel Jones, making it very difficult for him to be operating. So I'd imagine that the Giants offense is going to struggle because Saquon Barkley may get going. And we have a video here on Pittsburgh Sports Live where Mike Tomlin professes, and he always does with the star player on the opponent, but professes how difficult it could be to stop Saquon Barkley. Praises Saquon. And deservingly so. Certainly a young stud running back in this league. But an offense that is so predicated off a running back is different than the norm these days. Certainly, that's not the norm. You don't normally have a team with a major running back leading the way and pounding him and giving him all the money. That's usually not a recipe for success. We'll see what happens with his future contracts. But Daniel Jones probably won't be able to get something going because they're probably going to be trailing in this game. The Steelers offense can't get going themselves. The Steelers defense is going to make it more difficult for Daniel Jones to operate. And then if they do get behind, it's going to make it even more difficult for Saquon Barkley to operate because obviously the Giants offense is not really geared to come back in games. It's more of a front heavy, lead heavy team if it does get lead. So week one should go to the Steelers. I think they're going to be able to do enough. And I've said this too, that while Ben keeps talking about how he's nervous and we see all these different clips from that Bigger Than Ben series that he has out there in his comeback season, he's motivated. This team has weapons. Eric Ebron, another big one, because that he's that security blanket tight end to help Ben more than ever and help him alleviate some of those mistakes of the last few years when he was playing and also doesn't have the headache of Antonio Brown and trying to force somebody the football. But there's going to be rust he's going to have to shake off for sure. So this week one could be either Ben crash or burn, or it could be Ben having tons of success. Either way, though, I think they beat the Giants. I don't think the Giants can handle the Steelers' defense. I don't think Daniel Jones can handle the Steelers' defense. And I think that's going to be reason enough for the Steelers to get that week one victory. And they normally do start slow in seasons. We don't know. Nothing's guaranteed, but they really do need to start out pretty hot. They should win these games. These are probably not playoff teams, these first two opponents. And that does segue. Again, Mike Asti here, the Steelers 2020 preview show here for Steelers Now, and of course on Pittsburgh Sports Live. And if you are here watching, I do see some of you watching. I don't see much chat activity. That's okay. You've been asking me chat questions while I've been hosting Pirates post-game shows. As I ignored you there. Maybe I shouldn't have, but nonetheless, the point is, you want to click on the subscribe button down there below on the channel. It helps us get this content to you. It helps us, pay the bills here, even in home studios, helps our sponsors like what's going on here on these sites and throughout the network. And of course on this channel, it's very easy. Just click the subscribe button, free to do so. And you'll get notifications when any of these videos go up, any mic drop shows, any of my opinions, any of our post-game shows, whether it be for college football, the NFL, of course, what we're doing around the sports world as well, but this football heavy broadcast. And of course, any practice clips, any press conferences for any of these teams, anyone in the region, really, Pittsburgh Sports Live for you. We think it's a unique outlet, and we're bringing it to you. We keep on going even in the midst of a pandemic. So we're having success, and we do thank you for it, but keep on coming with the likes there and also clicking subscribe. Week 2, for the Steelers, Denver Broncos. Denver is obviously week 2 on that schedule. That one, just a typical Sunday, 1 p.m. game. And this is another one that Denver's been a team we know years ago. They were a contender with Peyton Manning and company. and they won that championship even when Peyton Manning was fading there towards the end. But this is a Broncos team they're kind of in flux as well. They probably a better team than the Giants, granted maybe more in flux in terms of the future of the franchise, but this is not an explosive Broncos team. And Von Miller being out is a major deal. I have to mention that. If Von Miller was there, and I heard a colleague say this is a winnable game for the Steelers. This is a game the Steelers should win. I'm going to say they're going to win this. They're going to start the season 2-0 on my predictions. And that is rare. They usually do have maybe a hiccup here to open up seasons. And of course, there can be rust in the midst of a global pandemic. And the weird offseason they've had, they didn't have preseason. However, Von Miller not being there, he can wreck a game. Von Miller by himself, regardless of the scenario, can wreck a game. Ben is getting lucky here because while Ben's shaking off rust, and you're not going to expect the guy to be perfect after not playing for really the better part of a year, the Giants defense is not going to be that much of a problem. And most likely the Steelers will have a lead in that game, or the Giants offense will struggle against the Steelers D and then put pressure on the reverse, and probably won't be a problem for Ben as much as it could be against other opponents. It would have been a problem against Von Miller in the Broncos defense if Von Miller was there. Von Miller not being there makes it a lot easier of a day for Ben Roethlisberger. So Ben's going to have an easier day without Von Miller. The Steelers should win that game as well. The Broncos not nearly explosive enough. We now go to week 3. This one, Steelers-Texans, and they've had some weird ones over the years, to say the least there. This is another game that despite Deshaun Watson, despite his success, despite how good Watson is, he's lost weapons this past season. Hopkins is now in Arizona, helping Kyler Murray, and certainly going to. But Watson now has more pressure on him. And he is a dynamic player. So this is different than Daniel Jones, who's more that Eli Manning style, and a defense who rushes so much and has so much across the board can really give a Daniel Jones problems. Watson's able to move around more. And this goes into bringing Dobbs in, by the way. And we already actually saw a clip here on Pittsburgh Sports Live I just put up a little bit ago before sitting down to do this, where Josh Dobbs is back on this team. Josh Dobbs dumped by the Jaguars for better or worse, and now picked up by the Steelers. It made sense. It was a low risk, high reward situation, maybe not even high reward, but more of a security blanket. He's familiar with the offense. Duck had a couple weeks. Duck Mania was fun for some. I honestly felt it was kind of annoying, kind of one of the dumber parts of Steeler history. A very, very nice guy. I've been around him a lot, but not an NFL starting quarterback, certainly. Forced into the role when Ben went down. Mason had the job for a while. He was playing well. The handcuffs were on him, though. Once they were taken off, he no longer was getting it done either. They went to Duck. Okay, Duck won a few games, but eventually he was exposed as well. They both were. Neither one of them really were ready for that moment, and it wasn't fair to hold him accountable for the season, but Duck is back to on the practice squad. Maybe we could see him again, but Hobbs there from familiarity purposes, more of a veteran, a guy that many wanted to stay on the team even ahead of Mason Rudolph. But I will tell you from being at camp last year, Mason Rudolph beat out Josh Hobbs fair and square last year. So that trade made sense. He's back though. And most importantly, what Josh Dobbs can do, you don't want to see him playing on the football field. That means Ben got hurt. That probably means Mason Rudolph got hurt and also isn't performing. That's not good. But through the scout team for practice, for guys that are on this roster that can do it for you in practice, Josh Dobbs can certainly simulate the elusiveness of Deshaun Watson and really help you there. I as much as I don't want to say the Steelers are going to be 3-0 again, and I've been open with this on Twitter, I'm more confident going in this season than I've been in a while. Knowing all the drama of those past couple of years, still there was talent. I still could figure things were going to kind of unravel. This is a team, while a similar roster, it has a more talented roster with some of these young additions. Some of the players that were there most of last season are now going to be there all of this season, Minkah Fitzpatrick in particular. Other players are a year older, and Deontay Johnson, for example, now have Ben Roethlisberger throwing him the football instead of Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. That's a big difference, as great as he was as a rookie. Pressure's on Connor, pressure's on Juju again to step up, and they maybe the weak running game is potentially that weakness, which some of these teams could expose if Connor does get hurt. Granted, Benny Snell in better shape, and maybe he'll be better as well. But the schedule is not that tough early on. Some of these teams have lost players while the Steelers have gained. So the Broncos lose Von Miller. The Houston Texans lose Hopkins. These are players that would have been on these teams last year if they were playing last year. The Steelers add, they subtract. Eric Ebron, again, a major addition for the Steelers, a major security blanket for Ben Roethlisberger. So I do have the Steelers going 3-0. I do think they're going to win this. I do think Dawes being there will help simulate. He can get around and move around, and maybe we'll have more success against the Steelers defense than, say, Daniel Jones would. But he has less weapons now. There's not somebody to really bail him out like would have been there before. There's not somebody for him to throw a bomb to and have a 50-yard reception and then run the rest for the end zone. Not really the case anymore. They're a recent playoff team, obviously. J.J. Watt playing his brothers, and how cool that would have been for the family if they would have been able to see that game in person, but we'll still be able to see it in general. And J.J. Watt is a future Hall of Famer. He is a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. As much as TJ maybe will win one of those in the future and is on a better team, I feel, or a franchise to lead you to wins in the future, JJ finally got his quarterback. He hasn't been able to be healthy enough for some of those playoff runs, unfortunately. They haven't been able to get far enough with him in the postseason for how good he is, but it doesn't take away from his individual greatness. One of the greatest defensive players of all time. And TJ has a long way to go to get to where his brother was, who mentored him to get to this point. But I don't think JJ can make enough of an impact on him on his own. I think the Steelers veterans, especially Ben, will be able to get over that. And I don't think Deshaun can do enough with now less weapons. So I do have the Steelers 3-0 again, and that's something that normally you'd have concern about because they're going to eventually lay one of these eggs. Steelers, Tennessee. That is the week 4 game after the Texans. You then keep in the division for the Steeler opponents. Steelers, Tennessee. And again, and I hate to do this, but as much as the Steelers are going to probably lose one of these games, I could easily see 3-1, and 3-1 wouldn't be bad. I'll kind of get this out there. I'm going to pick Tennessee to be a win again. So I'm going to have the Steelers at 4-0. I get that's probably maybe a little bit optimistic. And I honestly, again, I keep it real. I'm not trying to just be a Steelers homer by any means. I threw the fan card away years ago when I got credentialed. I'm trying to be fair. But Derrick Henry is a great runner. But this is a Steeler defense that really can lock down against the run. And it's not the same Steelers defense as many years ago that nobody would be able to run against Pittsburgh. If you're going to beat the Steelers, you're probably going to pass. That secondary is probably still where you're going to be getting the victories against the Steelers defense. That front enough, especially with those linebackers and just the speed and athleticism everybody they are on the field. You're not going to be having a quarterback who's going to have tons of time. Okay, Bud and TJ, they want to combine for 30 sacks. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. That's a high number. But you have two guys like that, and Bud played better than many would have expected last year. If he does even half of that this year with TJ, who's probably stepping it up again, it's why I feel TJ is probably Defensive Player of the Year maybe this year. That's a pick of many more than Minka, because you can take Minka out of the game. You can take Minka out of the game. You can avoid him as much as he's Polamalu and trying to find the football. You can make it harder on him to do so. TJ, you cannot take him out of the game. He can still dominate. He will dominate. He will win some of these games like he did last year, even though they failed to make the playoffs. But I think the Steelers defense can snuff out a team that's so focused on the ground. I know Tennessee was a playoff team last year. I didn't see them as really a contender despite beating the Patriots in the postseason. Brady, who is declining, has all those weapons now in Tampa. He should be better than he even was last year, but didn't have him last year with the Patriots. He got exposed a little bit towards the end of his career down there in that game. And they made mistakes, and yeah, they can force that. But the Steelers, again, if Ben stays healthy and can play smarter than even he did a couple years ago, they won't make as many mistakes as they did with Mason and with Duck, you would assume. And it should lead to a win here, especially against a team that is so focused on the ground. So to be clear here, and I do actually now see some chat activity, I have the Steelers going 4-0 to open up the year, but I want to make this clear again. I could easily see the Houston game or Tennessee. One of those two, just because it's Steeler football and that's how things go, one of those two could be a loss. I don't think the Giants, I don't think Denver, but one of those two could be a loss. You could maybe throw it a 3-1 situation, but I'm going to say 4-0 based on, mapping out and kind of breaking down those games. Dobbs is also good for the scouting team as a mobile QB. Yeah, I brought that up. I don't know if you were listening at the time, but yeah, Dobbs is mostly there, obviously, to help in practice. And it's not just Watson. They're going to face a lot of mobile quarterbacks throughout this season. Not only does he have continuity and knows the offense so well, he can really mirror that in practice as best as anybody else. Certainly Duck and certainly Mason would not do that. And that's an underrated part, I think, of bringing in Dobbs and bouncing Duck. Is Dobbs way better than Duck if he'd have to play? No. Is he better, in my opinion? Yeah, but do we have tape to really say that? No, because he didn't perform in practice last year, and Hodges did win some games. So forget that argument. Say that they're both guys that you wouldn't want to play at all if you're winning, because that's true. I think we can all agree with that. Who can help you more in practice? Who can simulate the opposing quarterbacks better? Enough of them? And maybe who knows the playbook better, because he was there prior to I know Hodges was there and played some games, and I know he started and won some, but he struggled. He didn't. They didn't open up the whole playbook. It was a condensed playbook when he was there. Dobbs got to see more, even though he didn't actually get in. He did play a couple years ago in that game against the Raiders. Either way, he can simulate Watson. He can simulate some of these mobile quarterbacks, and that is where he really will help this team in practice. So that absolutely makes sense. Do you think the Steelers will move Edmunds to middle linebacker with Bush and Davis at safety? I mean, that's interesting. I mean, Devin Bush is going to be a guy that you're not going to mess with too much, though. He's a very versatile athlete, but I said this before, and I didn't even bring him up before, but of course, he's part of that linebacker core, not as much in the same positioning, obviously, as TJ and even Bud, but maybe not going to help as much in terms of sacks. But he's a stud. He's a stud in the making. He struggled early on last year, but the guy was a rookie. Many got on him, but he was a rookie. He was a leader at Michigan right away from rookie minicamp last year. He was calling out plays. He seemingly knew all the plays. A lot of us in media were very, very impressed with Devin Bush right away. Had the weird suit on draft day, but otherwise he was very impressive. And he does I did a show on this actually a while ago. So search Pittsburgh Sports Live, search Steelers Now, search Devin Bush on any of those, because you're going to see shows I did back then talking about Devin Bush being the future face of this franchise, comparing him to Ray Lewis for the Ravens when he started out his career in Baltimore. And no, I'm not saying he's going to retire as one of the greatest linebackers of all time. Good, not predicting that this early. Didn't do that rookie year, of course. Wasn't an immediate impact like Ray Lewis, but who was captaining one of the best defenses of all time only a few years in. But he gave the vibe, meaning they're going to build around him, meaning that especially with Juju probably leaving after this year and Ben getting older, who knows how much longer he'll be there. The defense is so young. TJ, you're going to pay him the money. Of course, he's going to stay. But aside from TJ and even a player younger, Devin Bush could very well be the face of this franchise moving forward, certainly defensively with a guy like TJ. And he's only going to get better. And he's such a smart player and an athlete. He can really go anywhere, but you're not going to mess with him too much and try to tinker too much. But I will say the safety, especially if a guy like Joe Hayden gets hurt, and he's probably going to miss some games. That's usually what happens with those veterans. That probably the secondary is the weakness of this team. Again, as I said, if you're going to beat the Steelers, you're going to do it passing on them more than running on them. But maybe they will get in your face so much you won't be able to. Moving through this now. So the Steelers, and I'll get to some of the rest of the chat there in a moment as we keep moving through the schedule. Mike Asti here, Steelers 2020 season preview show here, edition of Mike Drop on Pittsburgh Sports Live. And of course, this will also be on SteelersNow.com. After those 4 games, and I do have the Steelers 4-0, granted I could easily see 3-1, and that would not be the end of the world. They could easily lose to Tennessee or to the Texans. I think those first 2 are locks as victories, though, especially without Von Miller. They got to get those wins. Philadelphia there in week 5, and then the Browns in week 6. Philadelphia is a team that certainly has been a contender recently. They certainly they had a championship season. They've had some disappointing seasons. A lot of this is on Carson Wentz being healthy and how dynamic he can be. Usually healthy early on in the year, though. Usually dynamic early on in the year. Some potential injuries to Miles Sanders, though. They're a team that I think could win that game. So I'm not going to have the Steelers be undefeated by any means. They're eventually going to lose here. I do. I think that's going to be a loss. I think Carson Wentz will play well enough early on. He won't get hurt by that point. I think there's enough weapons down there in Philadelphia. It'll be an interesting game. It certainly could be a game the Steelers could easily win, but I'm going to peg that as a loss just because at some point they got to lose here. So I'm going to have that be a loss to Philadelphia. I'm going to have them beating Cleveland, though. And another year, Baker Mayfield. I know I have a colleague who got very, very lofty and said Baker would lose his job by week 8. I don't know if I want to go that far, but I wouldn't be shocked. Just because obviously he's the future, obviously he's the first-round draft pick, obviously the money is there. They're not going to get rid of him. He's not going to be someone they're going to quit on in week 3. Week 8's probably early, but I wouldn't be shocked if he struggles again. OBJ being there, we know about some reports of what he's into, but if he can get his mind focused and off of that crap, and I mean that literally, for anyone who's aware of that story. Landry, they have weapons. Again, Hunt, again on the ground, they have weapons. But those weapons didn't mean anything last year because Baker Mayfield regressed, made more mistakes, and maybe was trying to do too much. Rather than just throw to who was open like he did his rookie season, as he was Offensive Rookie of the Year, he tried to force it into some of those stars that came over. And we know the rivalry. We know Myles Garrett. And that's going to be interesting with Ben, too, if they're going to try to hurt him or what's going to happen. It's become much more of a heated rivalry in recent years, even with the Browns. I get neither team, really, to be fair. Neither team being a legit contender. The Steelers haven't been in the playoffs a couple years in a row either. The Browns, well better than they were when they didn't win any games. So this is a team that certainly is going to be a contender, I would say, to 7-9, possibly. I don't think they're a playoff team, though, because I think there's going to be too many playoff teams in the division and elsewhere in the conference, obviously, from where I'm going with the Steelers show. I think that's a win. I think they maybe will split the season, but I think that they win that game. Steelers-Ravens then is the next one. I could see that being a loss. They had problems last year to Baltimore. They certainly did. Obviously, Jackson's the MVP. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's an MVP-style player, could easily win another one. Who knows about the playoffs? He certainly is prone to maybe make some mistakes. He certainly is somebody that could get hurt too. And I've said this before, and it's not a knock on him. He's already played better than some expectations, certainly mine in his career. But in terms of long-term, comparing him to, say, Patrick Mahomes takes care of himself much more. He's much better in the pocket. He can find everybody on the field, not certain routes. And there's still work to be done with Lamar Jackson. Granted, he's so athletic, he can overcome that. But I do still assume that he is going to maybe at some point in the future, maybe not this year, miss some games, start getting hurt, maybe breaking down. We'll see. If he's healthy, though, he's dynamic. They certainly could win that game. And that's, again, Dobbs is going to be doing some work in practice for sure. But I do think that can be a winnable game for sure. I mean, you're talking about a Steeler team that on paper should be just as talented as the Ravens, but the Ravens have a lot of weapons. So that's not something to sniff at there, the Steelers-Ravens. So I have the Steelers' first loss being to Philadelphia, have them beating Cleveland. That's really tough there. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead and say they're going to lose to Dallas. Dallas is one of the better teams in football. There's so much going on there. And yes, there's drama. And yes, they're not near what they were in the early to mid-90s, even though their fans think so. Dak Prescott playing for a contract. I get it all. That's a talented team. I'm going to say Dallas will beat Pittsburgh. I'm going to say the Steelers. Well, here, I'll put it to you this way. The Steelers are going to split with the Ravens and split with the Browns. So you can give it a loss or win if you want. Doesn't matter. They're going to split those games, but they will lose to Dallas. Then you go to the Bengals. It's going to be a win. The Bengals are just not ready yet. I think this will be maybe the Steelers' most impressive win of the year in terms of the final score. I'm not saying beating the Bengals is going to be impressive in general, but this is a Bengals team that, yes, A.J. Green's there. Yes, Tyler Boyd's there. There's talent there. A.J. Green, hopefully healthier this year, did not get himself out of town to New England like some would have thought. He's going to be there with the Bengals this year, barring some other move. But Joe Burrow, who I believe is the Tiger King, I believe he's the future of that franchise. I believe he will lead them to somewhat success, and when they start winning again, he will be the quarterback. I do believe in him as an NFL caliber quarterback. Not this year. Not this year. Not this year. If anyone is going to be affected the most as a rookie, without a regular offseason, without a preseason, and Tomlin's talked about this a lot, it's not going to be receivers like Chase Claypool. It's not even going to be guys changing teams and learning new systems like an Eric Ebron as a tight end, a pass-catching tight end who does need to know the offense. It'll be hard on them. but a rookie quarterback is going to be the hardest. They have to learn everything. They got to deal with defenses that are going to swarm like the Steelers, who are going to bring the kitchen sink in that game more than ever before. He's not going to be able to get anything going on. It's going to be a problem for the Bengals and Joe Burrow. He might be the guy for the future, but again, not today, not that game, not this season. It'll be a rough season, I'd imagine, for Joe Burrow. But I think he will show signs that'll mean he's still the guy for the future. Moving on to Jacksonville, another team that just an exodus of players, including Josh Dobbs. That team is going nowhere. That team's not a contender. That's going to be an easy win for the Steelers, or you'd at least imagine it should be. Certainly, you got to pick that as a victory. Then you go to the Ravens again, and as I said, they're going to split those games with the Ravens, so that could either be a win or a loss. It's immaterial. Maybe the Steelers will win the game at home, and the Ravens will win the game in Baltimore. Either way, I do have the Steelers splitting with the Baltimore Ravens and splitting with the Browns. I think it's fair because of the rivalry. So, and the talent there with Baltimore in particular. So win or lose, they're going to split those games. Steelers, then Washington football team. And I did name one of my fantasy football teams, the Mike Asti football team, with a little trademark symbol there just to be funny. But they don't have a team name necessarily. They're just the Washington football team. No longer having the other team name that they had for their history. And there's weapons there. They no longer have Adrian Peterson, though, but they're getting younger. They're looking to, build something for the future. Their Ron Rivera's there, and he's getting over his illness. And once he's healthy, he'll be able to really put his stamp on that franchise. And he did build the Panthers up. So he is a successful coach. He seems to be the right fit there. He loves being there, wants to do it for that franchise. Again, a year too early. There's not enough there. It's still a young team overall, and a defense like the Steelers will really feast on that team probably. But again, Dobbs, could help you in practice, could help simulate what maybe you'll see with the Washington football team. That should be a victory. Again, another 1 p.m.er for the Steelers. Rounding out the schedule there, you're going to see the Bills, then the Bengals again. For some reason, here we go. Okay. Then you're going to see the Bills, then the Bengals again, Colts, and then Browns. Bills is a team that's going to potentially be an issue. I mean, that's a primetime game there. That's a potential decent Bills team. I know there's a lot of expectations around the Bills, and there has been for a couple years. This is not going to be a Steelers team that's going to go 15-1 or 14-2 or anything like that, even if I do believe, and I said this before, and I'll say it now, that they're going to be a playoff team at least and break that back-to-back missed playoff slump they've been in. I do think there'll be less drama this year with Cam Hayward really secure as being part of this team, and he's a big deal locker room leader-wise. I cannot speak on that enough. All of us in media speak on it because it's so true, and we're not just kissing ass. He talks to us anyway. He's so great with the media, but he means so much to the team in the locker room and on the field. He's still a great player on the field, deserves that money for that. But the Bills, I'll just say that's a loss because, again, they got to lose some of these. The Bills are potentially a good team. The Bengals, though, they should win both of those against Cincinnati. Maybe that'll be flexed out of being a primetime game as it's currently scheduled. That is a Bengals team, or at least from what I'm looking at as it's currently scheduled. Doesn't deserve primetime. Again, there's talent there. Burrow could be the future, but just not yet, not his rookie year. The Colts, the Steelers have always been able to do well against Phillip Rivers. I love him. I think he's a future Hall of Famer. I think he's wildly disrespected. I think that just because he came out in that same draft class with Eli Manning, who won a couple rings, and Ben Roethlisberger, who has a couple rings, another Super Bowl appearance, and they're both, Ben's a Hall of Famer for sure. Eli's probably going to get there, even though I've argued in rants for another day that Eli's had a little bit of an overrated career with those two big moments and solid team seasons, but tons of mistakes and never really the best quarterback or near it in the league, mostly inconsistent actually throughout his career, but the numbers are there. He's probably going to get in, and having that last name helps. And then you have Phillip Rivers. No ring, no Super Bowl appearance, tons of numbers, also a lot of mistakes in recent memory. Certainly, maybe, this could be the year where he really falls off that cliff. If we're talking about aging quarterbacks still in the league, and we're talking about Tom Brady, if we're talking about Ben Roethlisberger, if we're talking about Eli's retired, if we're talking about Phillip Rivers, who's going to have that fall off the mountain first? I would probably say Phillip. Brady just is surrounded by so many weapons there, and he's not what he was a few years ago, but still can lead a team to win, certainly. Ben so motivated, so many weapons around him. And I do feel he is going to be better than maybe some would even expect this year. Phillip Rivers, not good his last couple appearances, last couple seasons. Stayed healthier than those two, I guess, but just not good enough. There's weapons going to be there now. Frank Wright is a great coach for him to have, a former quarterback who's done it in the league. He's going to have weapons there still with T.Y. Hilton. He's going to have tight ends. That's going to help. He made his living and, buttered his bread with Antonio Gates for so many years with the Chargers. But he look at his career numbers. He's a Hall of Fame player. He's maybe the Dan Fouts of this era because no Super Bowl appearance. It sucks with that same franchise. He's gone. He's in a better situation. I think the Colts could be a playoff caliber team, especially in a very winnable division, for sure. But again, to be fair, the talent I think is going to be a lot for the Steelers, and the Steelers generally do well against Rivers. That defense for the Steelers generally does well against Phillip Rivers. So even though they struggled against the Colts last year and Phillip Rivers was not there, I'm going to say that is a victory. And then the Browns game, and as I said, they're going to split with the Browns. Maybe who knows who's going to play in that game might be important, though, as that ends the season, depending on where those teams fall in terms of playoff positioning and if the Steelers rest anybody or anything like that. This is not a murderer's row schedule. And of course, the Steelers are always going to lay a few eggs here that you would figure they shouldn't be laying. They're going to lose some games that you would assume are going to be victories. Vegas odds-wise, I would not be shocked if they're favored in maybe all but 3 or 4 of these games. And certainly the Ravens games are going to be part of that. Maybe Dallas, maybe Philly, maybe Buffalo. But would it really shock you if they go ahead and lose to the Washington football team, trademark, or if they lose that game to the Colts, if Phillip Rivers can handle the Steelers defense? Granted, not normally the case. I would be shocked if they lose both to the Browns. I would be shocked if they lose both to the Ravens. If I have to say who they're going to lose both to, if they do lose both to one of those two teams, they more often would lose both to the Ravens because they're a better team than losing both to the Browns. I don't think that happens either way, though. I think they split with both of those teams and will be able to sweep the Cincinnati Bengals, mostly because, again, Burrow's not ready, and we'll see if he lasts the entire year or what that situation will be. It's not a hard schedule, though. It's really, really not an incredibly tough schedule. It really is not. You have a situation there with Dallas is a talented team in there, but even other recent playoff teams like Tennessee and a few others, I'm not scared of the Titans. Never been scared of the Titans. I mean, they had that 7-9 BS with Jeff Fisher for all those years, and now they're better than that. And I think Mike Vrabel's the right guy for that team. I like him as a head coach. He's really galvanizing the troops. But we saw with Tannehill last year, and yes, he led them to the playoffs, and yes, he didn't make tons of mistakes, and yes, he managed those games. But they're a team that's led by a running back. They're easier to stop because of that, unless Derrick Henry just goes nuts, which he did in the playoffs. But are you going to expect that for his whole career? Are you going to expect that again? You can easily key in on them a little bit easier than other teams that are more dynamic. And that's just an odd way to build a team in this day and age. So could it be a win for the Titans? Sure. Am I going to pick it? No. Again, as I said, I have them 4-0 to start the year, but they could easily lose to the Titans or the Texans. One of those games could be a loss. They could be 3-1, which would still be a win for the team because you don't have any divisional games in there. And that one of those is an NFC team. I definitely think those first 2 games got to be wins. They will be wins. I think Von Miller being out makes that a win against the Broncos. Otherwise, maybe it could be in question. He could wreck a game, as I said earlier, but they will win with him being out here. And just looking at the schedule here, okay, say 1, 2, a loss to the Ravens, a loss to the Browns. At worst, I think at worst, this team goes 10-6. At worst, this team goes 10-6. But I will say what I've been saying on Twitter for weeks now, and I know others have as well. I feel like I was out in front, but either way, again, old takes exposed can strike me down if I'm totally wrong. And I hate being so optimistic because I'm not a homer by any means, and some are going to say that. But I'm going to say the Steelers team is going to win the AFC North. I think the Ravens are a great team. I think they're one of the favorites in the conference as well. They're certainly going to be a playoff team. It may come down to those 2 games. I do think they're going to split those 2 games. But I think the Steelers have more overall talent, actually. I know Hollywood Brown. I know the talent on the Ravens. I know Lamar Jackson, of course. And again, this is no knock on Harbaugh versus Tomlin. I think they're both great coaches. They're both probably going to go to the Hall of Fame someday. They're both two great coaches of the era, just behind maybe certainly Bill Belichick. And then, they're right up there in the same class with Andy Reid and company. And we'll see. Mike McCarthy trying to do it again with the Dallas Cowboys after doing it with Green Bay and being bounced. But I think Harbaugh is an underrated coach. I think he actually maybe even he deserved a Coach of the Year a season ago. But I think the Steelers year. I think there's less drama there. I think the Steelers are another year together, more weapons, more talent, great additions. Eric Ebron again is going to be that fantastic addition, maybe the best offseason addition for any team besides maybe Brady on the Bucs. And I do realize he's there, but what he's going to mean to Ben is just such a big deal. So I'm going to say the Steelers team goes 12-4. I think that's where I have them. I'm going to say that Cowboys game is a loss. I'm going to say they're going to lose one to the Browns. They're going to lose one to the Ravens. You know what? You maybe talk me into 11-5, lose one to Philly, and maybe lose the Bills game. So what I'm going to say is 12-4 is the ceiling. 11-5 is probably where maybe I'll fall. So if I have to be nailed down right now, I'll go with an 11-5 prediction. I don't think it's much worse than that, though. And I do feel like this team, especially if it's more on the 12-win side, will win the AFC North. I think somehow they're going to win the AFC North. I think it's only the Steelers-Ravens that get in the division. I'm not going to do a Super Bowl pick or the rest of the playoffs or any of that. This is just the Steelers 2020 season preview. But I think the Steelers will win the division. I'm going to go out there with a bold prediction, bang down on the table. The Steelers will win the division, squeaking it ahead of the Ravens as well. And I want to get through the schedule there as I close things out. I will see a little bit. I see some chat activity still there. To get back on the line, less time for quarterbacks to throw. That's why I think the Steelers are going to win some of these games, especially against these mobile quarterbacks with Dobbs kind of mirroring what's going on in practice so much. They're going to give these mobile quarterbacks fits, and it's going to be tough on them unless they get the ball out really, really fast, which they're young, that might be their problem, whereas some of the veterans will probably get it out fast enough. Or even Rivers, if he gets it out fast, okay, he has the arm strength, but he's been losing it the last couple of years, and he usually struggles against the Steelers defense because of that. And again, talking about the safety, talking about the secondary, again, I think that will be the weakness of this team. It kind of always is. Teams will be able to pass against the Steelers if they get wins, probably not run against Pittsburgh. Again, I've said this before, and I'll kind of close, I guess, this direction. The pressure's on Connor. The pressure's on Juju Smith-Schuster. They know it. I know it. Everyone knows it. People don't want to say it. They like these guys. They're fun. They're nice. I'm not talking about Juju's off the field, any of those antics. Granted, it might hurt him money-wise if it's with the Steelers because of what they just went through with AB. I'm sure the Rooney family doesn't love it, but he's not Antonio Brown level nuts. I covered that guy. He's not Antonio Brown level crazy. He's not destroying the locker room. He just simply was great with AB. Juju Smith-Schuster, his first couple of years, was having historic seasons. You're comparing some of those numbers in the rookie season, certainly to Randy Moss, 900-plus yards receiving as a rookie. Then, of course, well over 1,000, a better year statistically than even Antonio Brown with AB on the field. But AB was taking the double coverage. AB was the number one wide receiver. He was the guy defenses were keying in on. Once he was gone, Juju, who did get hurt last year, of course, and was dealing with Duck and Mason Rudolph, but he hadn't been good. Even if you go back to games AB missed and the end of the previous season, Juju and Connor both have made mistakes in which they fumbled the football and lost games. They can't be doing that anymore. These guys want to be the guy and want those contracts, especially Juju. Very, very, very likely to be gone after this year. I think they did draft Chase Claypool with a similar player to Juju, with him replacing Juju in mind. Obviously, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, they can emerge and hopefully be even better, and you'd figure be even better with Ben versus Mason Rudolph versus Duck Hodges. So they all should be better off with a veteran quarterback as long as Ben stays healthy. A lot of this predicates on Ben staying healthy. If he gets hurt and you have Mason again there, obviously – back to 8-8 probably, and it's not going to be a playoff year. Ben's healthy is what I'm talking about. But they all should be able to be better. Even if Ben makes mistakes and throws some interceptions, and not in any way do you want that if you're a Steeler fan, but it still should provide more of a dynamic offense that will score more points and take more chances. But they're opening up the playbook a lot with the offensive coordinator like Matt Canada, who's bringing some collared looks, and Ben already singing his praises. If Ben likes the OC, that's a big deal. We all know that. There's drama if he does not, going back to him and Todd Haley. So he likes Matt Canada, and that's in Pittsburgh. If you're a Pitt fan and not a fan of, say, other teams in the region, like the Mountaineers, who we cover here now a part of the Now Network at WV Sports Now. You're familiar with him. And he's going to be in that same room, maybe awkwardness when he walks by Pat Narduzzi after some recent comments, but Ben like in Canada. So he does well here with Ben for a couple of years. Maybe he earns an NFL head coaching job. That'll really be a way to laugh at Pat Narduzzi. And Pat Narduzzi said he wanted to get you head coaching gigs. Well, that could be one that I don't know if Hal will take credit, but that'll be one that maybe Matt Canada can look forward to. Ben likes him, though. You're going to see a lot more dynamic plays from the Steelers offense. No one's going to have handcuffs on him. Granted, they don't want to get Ben hurt, especially early on, but it's not a hard schedule early on. There's nobody really to rush the passer that's going to give Ben fits early on. The schedule doesn't have that many difficult teams and that many great opponents throughout, except for, again, the Cowboys are in there, the Bills are in there, the Eagles are in there. It's divisional games. Obviously, the Ravens and Browns, they're probably split, but they could beat the Browns in both of those games. They could beat Cleveland in both. Probably not beating Baltimore in both, but you like to think they would split and at least win one of those, certainly at least the home game. It's not that tough of a schedule. Really isn't. And they deserve it. They missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. This is not a team that's been in the postseason recently. But I think the veteran leadership there, the continuity, the less drama, the fact there probably will be less drama and they're not going to permit it, even if they did in the past. And you can blame up Tomlin, whoever for that, for letting it get out of control. They're all gone now. They're not going to let that happen this year, I'd imagine. And while Juju's probably not back after this season, he's going to get some chances to really turn it on. And maybe he'll either, even if he performs, he's probably not back because they're not going to want to pay him tons of money. And they know that he's performed only with AB there. Or they need him to perform without AB there as the number one guy. Juju needs to step up and be the number one guy facing that double coverage, facing those looks, facing the defense keying in on him before he really can say he's worth number one type money. So this is a big season for him individually. Connor the same. Connor, Snell, Samuels, even McFarland. McFarland has a burst. Talked about that with a Washington Times writer throughout the channel again. Search that here as well as on Steelers Now. I want him to bring in Fournette. It didn't happen. He's down there in Tampa. I wanted it to happen in the draft. Wanted it to happen later. It would have made him and Connor a great 1-2 for a team that's in win-now mode. But for a team off of recent playoff failures, recent seasons of not even making the playoffs and all the drama the Steelers have had, they have got better. They have more talent. They're more focused. There's even better, I'll say that. Not more, it's the same, but better. I think they're better at this leadership on this team. And I think they're more galvanized. This team is going to be more together. They have a lot of these players like Minka, again, who's going to be there the entirety of the season. The schedule's not that tough. They even played in close games with some of those teams without Ben. And to even be 500 with Duck and Mason in that carousel, honestly, that's a little bit impressive. They would have somehow crawled in. Tomlin, I could have argued, for Coach of the Year. But either way, they got to somehow make the playoffs. You can't stand for several years in a row, 3 years in a row, even with injuries. Although, of course, if Ben's out, then it's the wash again. But either way, there, of course, I will tell you this, and here's one guarantee. If Tomlin's gone as a Steeler coach after this year, obviously they missed the playoffs, but it's also because Tomlin, or they won a championship and Tomlin rides off into the sunset. But it's still on Tomlin's own accord. They're not going to fire this man. Not going to happen. Steelers franchise doesn't fire head coaches. So they lose that first game. You're going to want Tomlin fired. It's just not going to go down. So I'm going to do shows about that. I'm going to tell you that at the time. We're all going to say the same thing, but you guys are going to want it nonetheless. So I get that out there here on the preview show. Want to make sure to follow us all throughout the Now family of networks, of course, as we're getting into football season. This is heavy coverage for a lot of these sites here. Pittsburgh Sports Now, WV Sports Now, obviously SteelersNow.com. We still have Pittsburgh Soccer Now up and running. The Hounds still going, a winning team here in Pittsburgh, which can't be said by everybody, and certainly not yet, even with the Steelers season having not started. Again, WV Sports Now going to be covering the Mountaineers. That Big 12 season's happening. Pittsburgh Sports Now, the mothership, that's going to be covering the high school scenes. WPIL also, obviously, for Pitt and those other teams that are playing, and they're going to play in the ACC, depending on what's going on. That's the plan as of now. Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Penguins off season, changes being made. Changes have been made. We'll see about next season. Pittsburgh Golf Now, Geico running that one, and that's we're losing the summer. We're losing golf weather, but still maybe a little bit for those courses. Maybe you got another month of it. I like to get back out there on the course at least once more. that's obviously a site that's up and running for us as well. So again, make sure you click on the subscribe button bottom of the video here, make it easier for us to get the content to you. You get a notification. It's as easy as that. It's free to do so. Also, make sure you hit up all those family network sites and you follow us on social. Follow us on Twitter here at PGH Sports Live on Twitter. My personal Twitter at Mike Asti 11, where you can tweet me. We can converse intelligently, or you can, of course, slide in and send me the hate mail and give me the death threats and criticism. Granted, some of that's actually true. So I will digress, but can do whatever you may at Mike Asti 11 there, and then also at PGH Steelers Now for us on Twitter for SteelersNow.com. So yeah, tweet me responsibly. Unfortunately, some of that's true because some of you guys actually do that. I do get some random people who get that mad, but tweet me responsibly. But if you do so at Mike Asti 11, I'll check the chat one more time here. Yeah, I got one more. Matt Canada is the QB coach, not the offense coordinator. I get it, man. I know that. Yeah, that's a good point though. Yeah, for sure. He's not the offensive coordinator, but in terms of Ben Roethlisberger loving Matt Canada, that's true. He's said it. Ben loves Matt Canada. Matt Canada's diction is big for this team. Matt Canada's plays, which you're going to see a lot of those coming from college based on what Ben has said, that's big for this team. It's going to open up the playbook. But yes, Matt Canada is not the official offensive coordinator. I did misspeak earlier. That could be a future job for him. I wouldn't be shocked in the NFL if he does get an OC position. But yeah, he's the quarterback's coach coming over after the time he spent with Pitt, obviously, LSU, obviously, Maryland, obviously. He's had those college run here before getting to the Steelers. But yeah, he is the quarterback's coach. That's important, though. Absolutely important. Obviously, the Haley was the offensive coordinator in terms of mentioning that drama that Ben's had, and Ben has to have continuity. He has to have continuity with the offensive coordinator, but also has to have continuity with the quarterback's coach. That's not a small thing. And I also believe, and this is why you can kind of get that jumbled, Matt Canada is going to have more involvement in this offense than most QB coaches do, especially with a veteran quarterback. Ben is listening to this man, even as a veteran. Ben is wanting his end of his career to be a ceremonial end, not be a dud like it would have been even a season ago and a season prior to that with him not playing well and then the injury. And Matt Canada's plays are being administered. I mean, you go through SteelersNow.com, Nick Faribaugh touching on a lot of that of what Matt Canada is going to bring to the Steelers offense. He's just going to bring a lot, and Ben is handling him maturely. So that's a big deal, sure. Quarterback's coach, normally a player like that, normally a player like Brady, Ben, Manning, they don't need a great quarterback's coach. They're going to not listen that much to the quarterback guy. But Ben is apparently listening to Matt Canada. That's apparently happening. So we'll see. But nonetheless, again, follow us everywhere you can. At Mike Asti 11 here on Twitter, at PGH Sports Live on Twitter for here with the channel. Make sure you click on the subscribe button there. And of course, this is going to be archived at pghsportslive.com as well as SteelersNow.com. And are you ready for some football? Because it is here. The NFL season is going to kick off. It's going to happen. We will see how wrong I am with this season, that I'm relatively optimistic about the Pittsburgh Steelers. And send me to Old Takes Exposed if you need to. I've been exposed by them before. I don't mind it, but I will say this as I close the Steelers 2020 preview show, which again, I, for a while, maybe thought wouldn't happen. Granted, I knew the NFL was going to power through, and they're here. So we'll see if the pandemic can hold up, because obviously postponing games like Major League Baseball is doing is going to be more difficult for the NFL. But I'm going to confidently say the Steelers team will definitely be in the postseason, and I'm picking them to win the AFC North. I feel that confident. But either way, football being here is the most important thing. Really, it's just about having football as the most important thing, regardless of how this season actually goes. But yes, I am that confident and picking the Steelers to win the AFC North.